Welcome to an explainer that is going to absolutely shatter and then completely rebuild your entire understanding of the universe. Seriously, have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what's actually holding the whole shebang together? Well, today we're diving deep into a truly paradigm-shifting framework called the space compression model. It's this incredibly bold theoretical proposition that attempts to unify the microscopic world of atoms with the macroscopic expanse of galaxies into one beautifully simple mechanical engine. So buckle up, because everything you thought you knew about matter, gravity, and the empty void is about to change.
For over a century now, modern physics has kind of been stuck in a profound crisis. We've got two unbelievably successful frameworks, right? Quantum mechanics, which handles the subatomic world using probabilities, and general relativity, which describes gravity through the geometric curves of spacetime. But the huge glaring problem? They're fundamentally incompatible. They literally do not speak the same mechanical language. And this disconnect really stems from a long-held assumption that the vacuum of space is just an empty void, a passive stage where zero-dimensional point masses just mysteriously interact across vast distances. But what if that assumption of nothingness is the actual root of the problem? What if the stage itself is alive?
So, the space compression model, or SCM, completely tosses out the concept of a passive void. Instead, it defines the vacuum as a structured spatial medium. Think of space not as emptiness, but as this living, breathing, superfluid substrate. This medium is made up of infinitely small, discrete units. They're two-dimensional disks called, and bear with me here, it's a bit of a funny name, smarticles, operating at the absolute smallest possible limit of reality, the Planck length. In their relaxed state, these units possess what the model calls potential mass. Basically, they have zero observable weight or friction until they are physically forced into motion or compressed.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to contrast the old paradigm with this highly visceral new reality. In the standard model, space is an empty void, and particles are these abstract probabilistic clouds or dimensionless points interacting via invisible forces. But in the space compression model, particles are not objects existing in space, they are localized mechanical compressions of space itself. So an atom isn't just a cloud of probability, it is an actual physical mechanical engine architected from the very spatial medium it's sitting inside of.
Okay, moving to Section 1, the mechanical origin of mass, and resolving the Yang-Mills mass gap. So how exactly does massless energy become solid matter?
The SCM proposes this incredibly fascinating four-step mechanical sequence. It starts with the atom's core acting essentially as a one-way spatial sink, like a funnel. First, we have intake, where the spatial medium is literally drawn in. Second is inward compression, where that fluid is forced into increasingly dense nesting spheres. Third, we hit the choke point, kinetic capture. Here, those spatial units are violently decelerated and get trapped in a state of high-density gridlock. And finally, step 4, mass formation. The energy of that spatial fluid is physically stopped and locked right into place.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that mass isn't some magical intrinsic property that a particle just magically possesses. No, mass is trapped kinetic momentum. It is the spatial medium pushed into a binary, locked state. And actually, this perfectly resolves a massive puzzle in physics called the Yang-Mills mass gap, which is basically asking why particles have mass instead of just staying as massless energy. Well, the gap is simply the mechanical threshold. It's the exact amount of energy required to force that spatial fluid into a structural gridlock against the natural expansion pressure of the vacuum. This brings an entirely new, deeply physical meaning to Einstein's famous equation. E = mc squared isn't just calculating energy out of nowhere. It's a literal state change formula. When these 2D spatial units spin at the velocity of light, c, they generate a 3D spherical footprint. This spin creates centrifugal surface tension that pushes back against the surrounding infinite spatial medium. And that constant fluid dynamic pushback, that is the physical origin of what you and I actually experience as weight and inertia.
Right. Let's hit Section 2, gravity as a spatial drain, the end of action at a distance. Let's see how this model completely redefines gravity.
This is going to completely flip your understanding on its head. Gravity is not some mysterious pulling force magically reaching across a vast empty void. According to the SCM, gravity is a volumetric consumption gradient. Because every single atomic core inside a planet is acting as a one-way intake funnel for the spatial medium. A massive object is literally consuming the space around it. Gravity is just the inward rushing replacement flow of that spatial fluid as it drains straight into the matter. When we lay out this comparison, the paradigm shift is just striking. Standard model gravity relies on the mathematical abstraction of space-time curvature, right? It describes the geometry beautifully, but it totally leaves the physical mechanism of the pull as a paradox. SCM gravity, on the other hand, gives us a tangible, fluid dynamic reality. The Earth isn't mysteriously pulling you down. The trillions of atomic spatial sinks beneath your feet are continuously eating the spatial substrate, and you are just caught in the inward rushing river of that replacement flow. Let's keep going. Section 3. The true nature of time. Dilation as a mechanical process. Let's explore how this spatial fluid literally dictates the ticking clock of reality.
We all know time slows down near really massive objects or at super high speeds, right? That's time dilation. But why does it happen? Well, the SEM explains this mechanically. Gravitational time dilation happens because a system's atomic engines are so busy fighting off the massive inflow of compressed space near a planet that they literally have less available rate for their own local internal updates. The clocks literally tick slower because their mechanical update rate is bogged down. And similarly, kinematic dilation happens when you move rapidly through the neutral spatial medium. Fighting your way through that fluid causes an internal mechanical lag. So time isn't a mysterious dimension bending. It's just the consequence of mechanical processing limits within a fluid.
Moving out to the macro scale now. Section 4. Resolving the dark universe. Dark matter, dark energy, and the cosmic web.
Astrophysics has been haunted for decades by the dark universe, these invisible forces we just can't seem to find. But in this framework, we don't need exotic invisible particles. Dark matter is reinterpreted as spatial tension. It's the fluid dynamic pushback, the centrifugal surface tension from high-density galactic clusters pressing against the surrounding substrate. It's the structural tension holding galaxies together. Conversely, dark energy is simply the cumulative exhaust of every single atomic engine in the universe. Since every atom is a spatial intake, the byproduct is a directional kinetic pressure pushing outward. The accelerating expansion of the universe? It's just the combined mechanical exhaust of reality's engines. And this actually elegantly explains some recent anomalies in astrophysics, often referred to as the cosmic glitch, where gravity seems to behave pretty inconsistently across those massive empty cosmic voids. The SCM suggests that because matter is heavily compressed space, objects actually contain more space than their physical footprint implies. So as matter actively consumes the medium, it pulls and stretches the topology of the empty voids around it, almost like stretching out a giant sheet of rubber. And that creates variations in the spatial fluid that distort our gravitational measurements.
Which brings us to Section 5, the grand unification and the tri-state ontology. This brilliantly illustrates how the space compression model brings absolutely everything together.
The universe isn't made of a bunch of different fundamental things. It is exactly one substance, space, existing in 3 distinct mechanical states. State 1 is the potential state. That's the uncompressed, relaxed spatial substrate just resting in the void. State 2 is the kinetic state. That's the spatial substrate in motion, which we perceive as light, charge, or energy. And finally, State 3 is the locked state, the highly compressed gridlock substrate, which gives us the physical mass and matter that actually makes up our tangible world.
If there is one core massive takeaway from this entire explainer, it is this. The universe does not consist of matter and space, but of space and various states of compression. There is no empty stage. There are no isolated actors. The stage and the actors are woven from the exact same fabric.
From those unimaginably small 2D smarticles at the Planck length to the high-density gridlock of atomic cores, all the way up to the sprawling tendrils of the cosmic web, reality is a single, continuous, breathing mechanical entity. Gravity, mass, time, and light are all simply measurements of the movement, intake, and interlock of this one universal spatial ocean. It takes all the abstract, incredibly dense math of modern physics and returns it to a concrete, unified mechanical reality.
I'm going to leave you with a lingering thought to take away. If matter isn't something separate that just sits inside a void, if your very atoms are just localized, swirling engines made of the compressed spatial fluid around you, then where do you physically end? And where does the universe begin? Think about that the next time you look up at the stars.